Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andy Markowitz, and I'm the product manager for Netreo. Today, I'll be leading a webinar on the new features added to version 12 of our flagship OmniCenter product. According to the attendance list, we've got a mixture of potentially new and existing customers with us today. Therefore, I'm going to spend a few minutes giving a brief overview of Netreo, and then I'll dig into the new stuff. If you have any questions, please enter them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar interface, and we'll stop to answer them at key points during the presentation. Today's IT organizations face numerous challenges. Command centers are typically overwhelmed by redundant, unnecessary, and false alerts. Fragmented views hide the real actionable information needed to solve problems quickly. There's a lack of predictive and automated reporting, which keeps IT teams in constant firefighting mode. And finally, there's the time and monetary costs associated with caring and feeding for all the tools that are supposed to help you manage this stuff. Netreo can help you deal with those challenges. All the previous said, that begs the question, what is Netreo? At its core, Netreo is a network and systems management application meant to give you complete visibility to your IT infrastructure and to address pain points typically experienced by your technical personnel. Before taking on the role of product manager, I was involved in the implementation of Netreo for our customers. Over time, recurring themes developed with regard to deploying the software. I started to refer to these as the 4 pillars of network management. These are the 4 elements you want your chosen NMS system to deal with or to possess in one manner or another. The first is getting a handle on alert quantity coming from your NMS system. Put another way, if everything in your infrastructure is in a critical state and sending you alerts, then nothing is in a critical state. Alert deluge has long been a problem in network and systems management. Too many false positive alerts obscure legitimate problems that need to be addressed ASAP. Through the capabilities found in Netreo's incident management engine, it can detect anomalistic behavior and can correlate disparate events. The result is that transmitted alerts are targeted and intelligent, only going to the proper recipients at the proper time. Next is deep insight into your infrastructure. Anomaly detection is only as good as the quantity and quality of the data available to your monitoring system. Netreo stores 3 years of historical time series data with both average and peak values. It has built-in 95th percentile business hours reporting, as well as statistical analysis to predict when a given threshold will be exceeded. This level of insight translates to your engineers more quickly getting to the root cause of problems, and your IT managers having the information they need to make informed decisions about the IT environment. The third pillar is unified visibility. It's not uncommon to find dozens of IT monitoring tools in use at large organizations. Network engineers have their tools, the systems people have another, and the DBAs yet another. This practice is as expensive as it is inefficient. Netreo offers unified visibility to all the information systems and applications in your environment that are crucial to your business, whether they're deployed on-prem or in the cloud. It brings together time series and availability monitoring data from vendor APIs, processes inbound telemetry data, and can run synthetic checks against your most mission-critical applications. Last is minimal care and feeding. Your IT administrators are likely extraordinarily busy, and the last thing on earth they need is another tool to manage. Netreo eases that burden through auto-configuration rules and template-based device setup. Gone are the days of manually tweaking your NMS to work in your environment. Even dynamic resources like SD-WAN and cloud services can be set up themselves, independent of human interaction. Your administrators can now spend their time looking after your infrastructure, users, and applications rather than tweaking tools. So how exactly does Netreo implement these so-called 4 pillars? This first screenshot depicts the results of some alarm correlation. What you can see here is there was a high latency threshold alarm for the Boston R1 router. This is known as a primary alarm. However, in the section below, you'll see all the correlated alarms. Why? Well, if your edge router at a given site is experiencing high latency, doesn't it stand to reason that any device that was behind that router would have latency issues too? Why would you want 4 emails in your inbox when 1 email will suffice? This happens to be one of the correlation rules built into Netreo out of the box, but that rules engine is completely customizable to fit your organization's needs. The second shot is of the Web Application Response module. I added this here just to demonstrate that Netreo does more than poll and monitor devices on the usual protocols. In this case, Netreo is checking a URL and reporting back on the response time from the application. In this image, the histogram shows 12 hours of data, but Netreo has 3 more years of historical information where that came from. Unified visibility is our third pillar and shown here. This screen image is of the main default dashboard on a Netreo system. It's meant to roll up all of your monitored information in a single easy-to-read screen. Servers, networking gear, applications, everything. NMS systems, especially in large environments, are very busy and process tons of data. It can be tricky to distill all that information down into a usable console, but that's the idea here. Simplify and summarize your IT infrastructure at a high level to make it easy to digest. Let's minimize your attention budget while at the same time making it easy to get details about problems that are only 1 to 2 clicks away. The final pillar is limited care and feeding. This image breaks down the automation engine found in Netreo and what's ultimately responsible for reducing that administrative burden. Starting at the top is the unified visibility piece. This is where Netreo is getting all of its information from. As you can see, mass device imports are represented here, as are adds, moves, and changes to existing devices. There's an auto-discovery network scanning engine that constantly crawls your network in the background looking for new resources. And there's also special functionality built in for vendor-specific APIs like Meraki and vCenter, things that don't conform to SNMP or don't use WMI, right? We can still pick those things up automatically, and they all get fed in, okay? Once all this information gets into Netreo, the automation engine begins to process it. Inbound devices have configuration rules applied against them. An example of an auto configuration rule might be device XYZ has a host name that contains the string SQL as the last 3 letters. Therefore, it should be categorized as a database server. Netreo contains a fairly large number of auto configuration rules out of the box, but this list is also completely customizable to fit the needs of your organization. After auto configuration rules are applied to a device, it gets checked for template association. Templates are the component in Netreo that are responsible for setting variables like thresholds and alert contacts, among other things. Taken together with auto configuration rules, they form the basis for what is Netreo's solution to reducing superfluous alerts in your environment. Last but not least is the deep insights view into your infrastructure once the automation engine has configured everything for you. It's here that we start to get historical reports and raw data as well as insight into things that are currently malfunctioning in your network. Okay, let's take just a moment to address questions about the overview of Netreo's features that have come in so far before we continue. No questions, okay. Let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to cover the new features that can be found in the latest release of the application. Rather than just diving into a laundry list of all the new features in version 12 of Netreo, it's important to understand where they fit within the context of an overall monitoring solution platform. This is what's presented here in this infographic. As you can tell, we'll be moving from generic IT concepts to the more specific features found in the new version. The first item on the list is going to be overall polling and monitoring strategy within an IT environment. Okay, version 12 implements a fully RESTful API into all the data in Netreo. The link between this feature and the concept is that you now have the ability to fully integrate Netreo into your overall IT landscape. Enterprise IT organizations typically rely on many tools to keep their operations running smoothly. ServiceNow for ITSM and CMDB, Chef for DevOps and orchestration, and Splunk for data lake storage are just a few in common use. All of these tools share a small subset of the same information, but it's a burden to maintain them individually. Version 12 has been designed with extensibility in mind for both upstream and downstream integrations. RESTful APIs are provided for functions ranging from receiving device configurations via Chef to the transfer of incident data to ServiceNow via webhook. From a benefit standpoint, this translates into 2 things. Eliminating functional silos. The reality is that most enterprise IT environment silos will never go away. The network engineers maintain things the storage folks don't have any concept of, and vice versa. However, with API integration capabilities in Netreo, at least there's the potential to tie all the disparate tools together to form a canonical source of IT infrastructure information that everybody can share and get insight into. The second benefit is boosting IT team efficiency. To demonstrate this point, let's take an example of an on-prem self-hosted ERP system. For it to perform at its peak, server, storage, network, and database components all need to be firing on all cylinders. In a large organization, that's 4 silos of tech folks. What happens if that application goes down and there isn't a single source of diagnostic information to give clues on root cause? You got 4 different silos of IT people pointing fingers at one another, trying to assign blame, and all the while your application is still down. If everybody's sharing information and singing from the same metaphorical hymnal, then that's going to boost IT efficiency and get you to quicker problem resolution. As we get into more specific into the deployment of Netreo in your environment, we talk about scaling your monitoring tools to make sure you're getting the proper visibility. Netreo in version 12 introduces the concept of service engines to add flexibility to your monitoring solution. It isn't always possible to get the visibility required to ensure your environment is operating as well as it could. Do you have sites in your network that are locked down due to HIPAA requirements? Are you an MSP with numerous customers that exist in overlapping IP space? Perhaps you have a large infrastructure that generates too much NetFlow traffic for a single collector. Version 12 introduces the concept of the service engine, or SE. These SEs consist of standalone instances of Netreo's main components that do the requisite work and report the results back to a core appliance. Multiple instances of these service engines can now be deployed, yet viewed and managed as a single entity. In this new release, there are 2 types of service engines. The first is a pull engine, right? This is going to consist of remote polling and then your data collection and service checking. So polling for SNMP, polling for WMI statistics on devices, doing your availability checking for open ports, things like that. The other type of service engine are push service engines, and these are passive listeners. This is stuff that, for example, listens to NetFlow traffic, that listens to inbound syslog and inbound event logs and SNMP traps and things like that. So those are the 2 types of service engines that are available. However, with this architecture, as Netreo matures as a product, there's a lot of flexibility here, and I would expect to see versions down the road us deploying different types of service engines to solve different types of IT challenges. So what are the benefits of deploying service engines? The first and foremost is scalability. We have some very large systems deployed out in the field. We've got one customer fully monitoring 11,000 devices, I think, and checking another 8,000 for up-down status. That's a ton of stuff. How much logging and traffic data do you suppose that those devices generate? By deploying service engines, you can expand your monitoring footprint beyond what can be handled by a single appliance. The second benefit is that there aren't any VPNs required for connectivity to these devices. All communication happens over RESTful API communication. Okay? In fact, as it turns out, it's the same API functionality I described a few minutes ago. It's the exact same API that these service engines use to talk to a core OmniCenter, the same that you would use to integrate with ServiceNow or Chef or whatever. And all this communication can be run in either direction depending upon your security posture. Netreo can be pushed remote data, or it can be configured to pull it down. That's a mouthful. Lastly, is the service engine architecture eliminates the potential of IP overlap. This scenario isn't typically a problem in a standard corporate WAN. But when we start talking about the MSP market, and other corner cases, it becomes very, very important. Now I've got some images here depict how the service engine architecture works. This first image is a typical Netreo deployment. You have a core appliance that connects through a corporate firewall to monitoring remote resources. Okay, so that's what we've got here. Again, this is a typical install. As I sort of alluded to a second ago, Netreo also works well in MSP environments. We have a product known as Overview, which can be thought of as a Netreo of Netreos. In that scenario, a remote network would have a Netreo appliance deployed. It would then have a VPN tunnel connectivity back to a core Netreo Overview appliance, where it could then be managed, roll up all its data. You would have a single view from all your remote OmniCenters from that one console. Okay, so that's the traditional Overview remote OmniCenter. What we've got here, this is a full OmniCenter living in this environment. This third scenario is meant to show the service engine architecture. It looks similar to the second VPN image, But instead of the remote site having a full Netreo deployed, it has only the service engine. There's no GUI to that appliance, and all data is actually rolled back up to the core appliance. Again, through either push or pull, it's bidirectional, right? But the idea is it's a slightly lighter footprint. You don't have to worry about syncing users and all sorts of stuff because this OmniCenter right here, right, is just a service engine. It is simply communicating back to this single instance. The beautiful thing about this feature is it applies specifically to managed service providers. And each of these scenarios can be mixed and matched. You could have all three of these at play in your network at the same time, depending upon what your needs are. That's why I say this is geared towards MSPs, but let's say you've got an environment where you've got a particular VLAN that's absolutely blocked off, and nothing is allowed in and out except for, RESTful API calls. You might want to deploy a remote polling engine. That's the idea there. Okay, now continuing down our funnel, we get to the center of it, which is the NMS application itself, and this is Netreo OmniCenter. These are the topics I discussed in my overview of Netreo at the beginning, and how Netreo addresses the typical pain points found in most organizations. Once we get past this, we get into tool setup and organization, because right with any tool, there's always going to be an implementation period. In that regard, the biggest new feature is the idea of business workflows and something called functional groups. Although there are exceptions, Netreo at its core is a device-centric monitoring tool. Now, what does that mean? Basically, you give the tool a name or an IP of a device to monitor, and it'll go out and do its thing. To that end, if you have a collection of devices, you have to organize them in some fashion. Netreo does that via three methods. A device can have a site, a device can have a category, and that can also have something known as a strategic group. For the folks on the phone that are familiar with the Netreo application, they're probably familiar with strategic groups. They're in pretty wide use. A strategic group is meant to be a logical and arbitrary way to group things in Netreo where it maps to a customer's environment. So for example, you might have an EHR application, or you might have an ERP application where you want a single entity to represent all the devices that are part of that application. Okay, it's intended to be more flexible than both site or category. In addition to other properties of strategic groups, in version 12, we've taken things a little bit further here. There's now the concept of business workflows and functional groups. A strategic group still exists, but it has two components to it. The first is called a business workflow and can be thought of as the UI component of the strategic group. Oftentimes there's a disconnect between the nuts and bolts technology components supporting a business and the actual impact those components have on the business's bottom line. These elements demonstrate the impact of individual variables on an overall business application health. Instead of parsing through multiple alerts in your inbox to deduce what impact an outage will have on your business, you needn't go further than a single click in a Netreo dashboard to a business workflow. Okay, the second component is the functional group. For those of you listening that are familiar with OmniCenter, you can think of a functional group as the administrative functions of a strategic group. So why is this important? How many of you wish there was a way to set up a device template or a maintenance windows based on a strategic group membership, but don't want to display that group in your main UI? From an administrative and process standpoint, this feature is huge. And based on my customer interaction over the past 15 years, something that will address a lot of sore spots in Netreo deployments. So that's what we've got in this screenshot here. You can see a strategic group can be a business workflow or it can be a functional group. This is a really big deal. And it really adds a lot of flexibility to the way that you configure OmniCenter, a feature that's now coming in 12.1. It's not in this release, but something that we are currently in development and it's going to come out soon. You're going to be able to apply device templates to a functional group. There was no way to do that before, and that's going to ease a gigantic pain point when it comes to deploying OmniCenters. Okay, last but certainly not least, we get to the bottom of the funnel. Fine-tuning. And now we're going to get into the weeds of what's new in version 12 and some more specific enhancements, right? So we've already gone through the funnel. Right, this is when we get the tools already deployed. These are just some of the fun new features that are also included in the new release. Okay, first there's a streamlined administrative tools interface. Previously in OmniCenter, device administration was spread across multiple pages. Now, all device administration functions have been brought together in one place and fully integrated into the administrative side of the device dashboard. Additionally, the category and site administration have been redesigned to be more consistent with each other and follow a unified workflow. So what you can sort of see here, I don't have this screenshot very big, but when you're in a regular device dashboard, you've got your tabs along the top. You've got your overview and your services and your performance, right? We never had that on the admin side. So we basically made it look the same, right? So instead of having a menu over here on the right-hand side where you've got different items that you have to go to different screens to configure, credentials, for example, we put the important stuff on this main page and then separate out the top with the tabs, just like you would in a regular device dashboard. Next, we've got the idea of multi-group Active Directory support, which allows automatic elevation of privileges by moving a user from one group to another. Okay, so in the past, prior to version 12, you can integrate with UI, but the way that it worked you can integrate with AD, but the way that it worked is that you would create one security group on your AD server, and anybody you wanted to use OmniCenter, you just drop into that security group. When they try to log into OmniCenter, they are automatically have a user created for them, but that user has regular privileges. The administrator, your tools administrator, your Netreo administrator, has to go and elevate the privileges of that person. So the new feature in 12 here is you've got the ability to use 4 different groups within your AD environment. So when people automatically log in, if they're a part of the super admin group, their privileges in OmniCenter are automatically super admin, right? So this gets into the idea of more, automation, right? OmniCenter doing things on its own, so you do not actually have to log into the tool and do the tweaks and care and feed for it. Okay, third, we've got serial number inventory reports for stacked switches. Stacked switches, while still managed as a single entity in OmniCenter, now also provide detailed information about the individual switches that are in the stack, right? As most of you on the phone probably know, OmniCenter is licensed on a per device basis, right? Well, when you've got a stack switch, and per device, you can think of it as per logical OS if you want, right? In a stack of switches, you've still got a single management UI. You've got a single management interface that OmniCenter is polling and then learning about all the interfaces in the stack. Well, that doesn't do so well if our inventory report before is limited to things that we are actually monitoring, right? So in version 12, the inventory report will now pick up things. I shouldn't say pick up things. The inventory report will not only pick up that master switch, but it will start picking up information about all the switches that are in that stack, so you can start getting some useful information out of your or additional useful information out of your inventory report. Okay, and then last but not least, in version 12, because security is always top of mind for us, right? We now have complete support for all credentials being encrypted at rest, right? What we had before this, right? OmniCenter runs in HTTPS and all the communication back and forth does fully encrypt everything. But when stuff was in the database, credentials weren't encrypted, which means if the system got broken into, right, those credentials were at risk. That is no longer the case. Again, this is just an extra stopgap and makes OmniCenter just that much more secure and suitable for running in your environment. Okay, that pretty much wraps up the rundown of all the new features you'll find in the latest release of Netreo. Can I answer any questions for any attendees listening in today? Okay, no questions. That was pretty simple. Thank you for joining us. I hope you picked up some useful information regarding the capabilities we've got to offer. As always, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact us at info@netreo.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you right away. Enjoy the day, everybody.